It's not the house that's haunted. It's your son.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
Welcome back to another episode of Slashers in Sync. And on today's episode, we're doing a throwback. We're going to be discussing The Strangers 2008. This time, we're not going to be taking a look at The Strangers Chapter 1. Instead, you can go check out our very quick review of it over on our Instagram page at /insync, which will be down below in the description on wherever you're listening to this podcast. Or you can find it on the official podcast page of Slashers in Sync. But regardless of that, The Strangers 08, I think, still remains a cult classic. It's one of people's favorite horror films, and it's actually one of the few horror films that scared you, right?
Yes. I want to say it's one of the handful of movies that actually kind of rocked me a bit while watching it. This one and The Descendants were the ones that actually psyched me out by first watching. I still haven't mustered up the courage to watch The Descendants, and funny enough, tonight was the first night I had watched Strangers again after the first viewing, so still felt a little like weird after, still very much like spooked out, but
You even looked to see if the door was locked.
yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna defend it in any way, shape, or form. I know I'm gonna do it regardless, so I did it right in front of you. But all in all, I enjoyed it a whole lot more than the one that we watched in theaters.
Chapter 1,
Yeah.
The retelling / remake or
Whatever it is.
I guess to quote the wiki page, the relaunch of the Strangers franchise in the form of a new standalone trilogy.
Yeah,
So-
which is weird because I thought it was going to be a prequel, especially with the titling and everything, because I thought the one that released in 08 was good enough.
I'm pretty sure we heard somewhere that it was a prequel. I don't think we
Yeah.
just made that up. Like,
Yeah, I don't know if it's the Mandela effect, if like if it was whispered or said, and then all of a sudden like it got taken back.
they changed it or something.
Very, very early on or whatever the fuck, but or maybe I just like misinterpreted. But just like MJ said, I do remember somewhere it mentioning that Chapter 1 is a prequel, like essentially talking about the origins of the people who became known as the Strangers, if you will.
Yeah. But I mean, regardless of that, we just didn't have like the best of time with Chapter 1. So again, go check out our review on our Instagram page. But we wanted to go back and take a look at The Strangers. And like Marva said, we had a blast watching this. So we want to break that down for you and just kind of give our thoughts of this film. And also kind of compare it low-key to the remake / relaunch. Just to kind of like see where I guess we want to explain just to people why we like this one more, if you will. So we wrote our notes down and we're going to break this down going scene by scene, or excuse me, like section by section, if you will. I'm going to go ahead and start it off with the opening. Now, you and I both said this. The opening to this film is already way more haunting than the remake's version.
Yes.
Just based on because they tried to do it in the remake with doing the whole 1.4 million crimes take place and here's the most brutal, but this one had like more of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre style where it makes you think like, oh, this shit's like based off true events, like, you know, and it was just so much more haunting, and it was so much more haunting in the opening for this one, especially since in this version they show you the murder scene already.
Yeah, it's almost like a flash forward.
Yeah, and you see the kids who were there, I guess Jehovah's Witness or like whatever they are, like dropping off like the
flyers.
The pamphlets or whatever. Like they walk in on this and they're just horrified, and like you're hearing like these kids' voices cracking and breaking as they're making the 911 call. Very like Forensic Files, very like unseen murder type stuff.
Yeah,
and super dope, very haunting.
Very much so, which I enjoyed because I think the Chapter 1 started off with like similar opening being like, oh, FBI says that it's 1.4 million crimes occurring in the U.S. annually, meaning that like I think the '08 didn't really go into the detail, but chapter 1 went ahead and dove in and said like one is happening every like 27 point like whatever seconds.
Yeah.
Translating to the fact that 3 have already happened right now since the movie started. Like I was expecting lines like that to be dropped with this movie because of how much chapter 1 emphasized on it, but the difference was there. The movie immediately opened up. It picked up just like how you said with like almost like photography flashes and then moments of the blood splatters or the different items being on the floor. You hear the kids' voices on the 911 call. You hear
Right.
the panic in their voices. Like it builds the tension that you need to kind of dive into the story. And then all of a sudden, the first scene that the audience can fully comprehend is just a standard scene at like a couple pulling up to a cabin in the car. And it's not the best of car rides.
Yeah. Very interesting, but I'll go ahead and let you explain the couple of this film and why it's a little bit different compared to the remakes.
So I guess like how I mentioned earlier, the drive, or at least the way that it opens up in the movie, you see a woman and a man in the car. They're not really talking. They're pretty quiet. And as time, at first you think like, okay, they're just in the car together. But then as time passes, you come to realize that, okay, there's this like weird, awkward energy around them. And then that awkward energy turns into tension. And then neither one of them are speaking until they pull up to the cabin. You come to find out that like they're coming from a party of sorts or so on and so forth. And
Yeah.
I like first time watching it, I immediately assumed that, oh, he proposed and she said no. Come to find out that, yeah, that definitely was the case. Like he had pulled his big move and she told him no, that she wasn't ready. While in chapter 1, you see this couple doing like a cute little road trip. They're from New York. The girl gets like a phone call from her ex-coworker about how like her ex-boss is in Greece on like a whole trip while she's driving all the way to, I think, Washington for some form of, or like Colorado for like
Somewhere, yeah.
somewhere on the West Coast from New York for an interview for being an architect. And like the couple are very much into themselves, like
Lovey-dovey.
very like cheery. The girl is almost like depicted as being a little bit naive. The guy kind of makes fun of her for it, but at some point in the early on in the scenes, it's established that the guy has asthma, at least for chapter 1. In '08, it's just they're quiet, they get in the cabin, and you kind of see how the guy in '08 was prepped for like everything after her saying yes. While
the champagne, the
rose petals, the
everything,
candles.
yeah.
While the buildup of the couple in chapter 1 is a little different.
Yeah, and I think I like that more that it is so like down because it gives you a very unpredictable, I guess, preparation for what's about to happen because you don't know like how the boyfriend is gonna react or how the girlfriend's gonna react. Like, they're both down, depressed. Like, I think it sets the tone very much. Whereas in the chapter 1 retelling, I don't want to put this down in any way because I do like a lot of Shudder films, but it comes off like your generic horror camping trip gone wrong Shudder / Hulu exclusive, if you will.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put down Shudder. I like their movies a lot. A lot of them are very creative, but it did come off like a very generic type of like horror film of like this couple super into each other. They get lost type beat, and there you go. You know, like this one was very different, and I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
And speaking of getting lost, if you will, I think the location of the '08's film is a lot better. Again, very generic. We're lost in the woods, wrong turn-esque, you know, like this one is more. I can't remember if they were in Texas. I'll have to like go back and check on that. But regardless of wherever they're at, they seem to be kind of like in the South. They're eating Bluebell ice cream.
Yeah.
So, but the one thing I wanted to point out is them being in the South is Marva and I are both from the South, even though we live on the West Coast right now. And we know what those open roads are like.
Yeah.
Especially in Texas. Those can be fucking scary, way scarier than the woods.
Petrifying, because it's just asphalt. Like not even every mile, like every so often there's a street lamp up, but there's so much woods and brush like in between and so many different noises that you can hear, be it walking or in the car. So you don't ever want to stop when you're driving, and you definitely don't want to be walking at night on those kind of roads.
And it's so quiet because maybe you'll get the occasional like delivery truck, and what I mean by that is like an 18-wheeler passing by like at 4 in the morning. But
commercial.
But other than that, there's so much space between the greenery and where someone's house is at, and then the big open highway that connects to everything else. It's quieter.
Yeah.
Whereas in the woods, you can at least hear crickets chirping. You can hear animals moving around. Like, you can hear stuff. You can even like hear the wind blowing between the trees and all that. You don't get that out there. It's a lot more terrifying. And again, just like I said, very generic-esque wood stuff for chapter 1, where they're like a cabin in the woods type beat. Whereas in
this
here,
one looked like a cabin in the country.
Or like just a house in the country, yeah, and it was just completely cut off from everything. And I think what sets the tone up a little bit more for this film is that in chapter 1, they stop at a diner, they meet like a mechanic, they meet a few other like locals there. There's plenty of people who would know that they're staying at the Airbnb.
Yeah.
So when the first stranger comes up and knocks on the door, like the guy makes a remark in chapter 1 about like no one even like, how did she come here? Like, we're out in the middle of nowhere. It's like, I mean, bro, you told like half of that town like where y'all were gonna be staying at. The majority of the town
heard. Like, don't worry about it.
Like a population of like 200 and like 50 of them heard where you're gonna be at. You know what I mean? And then on top of that, it's the only Airbnb in that location. Whereas in this, it's supposed to be like his uncle's home or something like that, or his dad's house or.
Something where like he's connected to.
Yeah, because the girl makes a remark about like, didn't he used to go hunting, so and so should have a gun here. Yeah, you know, so it's very much like a house he hasn't been to in a long time, but no one knows that they're there. He had to call his friend to like tell him exactly where he was at, change of plans, come pick me up here. Yeah, like nobody knows where they're at. Like I thought that was a very cool inclusion of that, and it just sets the tone for like if someone pops up here. That's a hell of a lot scarier than how it was presented in chapter 1.
Definitely. It's just like MJ said, it's very much like perceived and shown that it's only the best friend that knows, and maybe like the guy's parents, and that's it. But that's only because of, I guess, how the property is owned in the movie. I mean, you and I talked about it for a moment there. Whenever the younger girl comes and knocks on the door, there's a huge difference between chapter 1 and the 2008 versions. Like in chapter 1, you just see a figure completely blacked out knocking on the door asking where Tamara is, while in the 2008 version the moonlight seems to still be like bouncing off of the younger girl's face, and you see her eyes moving and fixating and like slight expressions on her face. You
can even see that she's a blonde-haired younger woman, you know.
Yeah, so. Like you can't tell her age, you don't know exact features, but you can see just enough to know that a face is there, which is eerie enough because she's not like crossing through the doorway, but she's not that far. So I want to say she's at like a distance to where if she ate or like she chomped down on an onion, the couple could have easily smelled that on her breath. Like not to make it funny or anything, but that's the amount of distance that they probably had. And I don't know, like in chapter 1 it wasn't really shown that the girl was close but not that close. In this one in 2008, like the girl's closer, it's scarier, and you can see the fear settling on both of the, I guess, protagonist's eyes.
I think in chapter 1, the boyfriend makes a remark that it's some teenager fucking around with them.
Yeah.
But we couldn't see that. Whereas in this movie, you can clearly see that. And you can clearly see that, like, the look she's giving off. Like you said, you can kind of see, like, her eyes, but you can't make the features of her. Like, it just doesn't look cool. Like yeah, she looks young, and maybe you don't anticipate for this younger person to do something, but you just know something's wrong, like with her not. And I think even like that guy, which I thought this was a pretty cool way for him to kind of, if they really wanted to write him out of the story, they later on use cigarettes as a way to get him out of the house. But when he says, should I follow her, people get lost out here all the time, I thought that was a very unique inclusion of that, you know, because that actually shows he's compassionate and that he's, you know, caring. You didn't really get a remark like that in chapter 1 for that boyfriend.
No, so, not at all. He seemed very like egocentric, very into himself. Like,
didn't want to be in this hick town, right?
No, not at all. So. Like, I'm better than you type beat, which was off-putting. I liked this couple more than I liked the couple in chapter 1 for sure.
Yeah.
Not because of like how real they were in '08, just more so in the sense of like I feel as if I could relate to these characters more. Um, chapter 1, they just seem kind of like the generic 2020 generation couple where like they're very much consumed by their phone and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I mean the boyfriend still steps away to go pick up food for the girlfriend. Um, once like they've settled into the cabin and so on and so forth, which is like the commonality between the two movies. But the one thing is that like the car isn't fucked up with or messed up, and the boyfriend doesn't need to get on a bike. This guy's like takes his own car and picks up the cigarettes.
Yeah.
So it's like
and guess what? It also makes a lot more sense for him to go, because I think the line he literally says is, "Nah, don't worry about it. I'll go get you them." And she's like, "No, like please don't, like don't leave me here." And he's like, "Listen, I need to drive."
yeah.
And that makes sense after what happened to them, like him getting turned down after a proposal. Like, yeah, that makes so much sense. Like for someone to be like, "Yeah,
Like
I'll
just take
get
the
you this
space.
because I need to," you know. So
Yeah.
so that makes a lot more sense than like,
Well, with chapter 1, the girlfriend just says, "I'm hungry."
yeah. So, but either way, though, I do like the couple more, like you said. And to go back to what you mentioned about the, I guess, street lamp, if you will, when we're talking about the location of '08, they have a scene where one of the girls is under the street lamp, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so scary, man. And that's something that you don't really want to see in real life.
Nope.
It's like you in the middle of nowhere, and like you hop in, you're in your car, you don't see anyone behind you. As soon as you get out, close the door and turn around, there's someone there. Like that's like one of the scariest things, because it's just like, where the fuck did you come from? How did you even get there? And of course, it happens to be right under the one fucking light in the area, you know? So it's just kind of like, to me, I think the open area, just again going back to that, just makes a lot more sense than what chapter 1 did. But nonetheless, I think they just came off a lot more eerier. Like the way they move, the way they would just show up in places, very Jason Voorhees like.
Yeah.
I also liked how they really did try to break into the house. It very much was like a home invasion. Because I don't know if you got this feeling with chapter 1, and we didn't talk about this too much, but it felt very much like a setup.
It did.
Like it felt like, wasn't one of them already in the house before they even got there? Or at least that was the implication that we got.
It was implied that the girl who was
upstairs,
looking for
remember?
Tamara somehow found a way upstairs, and the guy with the potato sack was already in the house, kind of like roaming around, but just kind of waiting for the opportune moment. Because I think when the boyfriend steps away, you see there's one scene that you and I went kind of crazy over for chapter 1. And it was in the beginning of the movie, which is when the girlfriend is playing on the piano after she just finished smoking and is playing that song. And the guy with the potato sack for a mask is just kind of sitting there listening to the song, but you only see that he's there with the camera panning out and the mirror, the reflection in the mirror first above the girl, above the piano where the girl is sitting and playing, and then as the camera continues to pan out more and more, you see the back of the man of the group.
That was a badass shot.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the only badass shot in that movie.
Yeah, definitely. The other shot that I thought was really nice in chapter 1 was when the girlfriend had fallen into that pit with all the branches, and like you could kind of see her disappearing into the shrubbery whenever she was slipping in. But I want to say that was like the first take of it. The second take and so on, it felt a little overdone. It took the charm out of it, but I don't know. Kind of like what you said, it didn't feel like a home invasion. It just kind of felt like it was a setup.
And we could be wrong. We only saw chapter 1 once, so if that wasn't the case, and if they did somehow break in, fine. But it just very much felt like the girl was already upstairs, and if it wasn't the girl who knocked on the door, then it was the other girl. It just very much felt like someone was already in the house, and that was very weird.
They were just kind of like cycling through or like mixing through. Taking turns being outside, freaking the people out, and then slipping back in.
Yeah, and it very much came off like a setup, which is why you and I kept questioning, this movie's going to do it different. It's going to be someone from the town.
Yeah.
You know, we kept bringing that up. So it's just kind of like, that was something that I think took away a lot of the eeriness that '08 had when it came to the way they broke into the house, the way they would basically stalk them, if you will.
Definitely.
But it just felt very much like a stranger's film.
Yeah. Another big difference between '08 and Chapter 1 is that with '08 you get the thriller aspect of the movie very early on, while with the most current one, Chapter 1, it feels like at least half the movie needs to pass before you start feeling the thriller aspect of it come into play.
Yeah, it doesn't really pick up until I think she gets out the shower, because everything before then she still rationalizes it as something.
Yeah.
She doesn't think anyone's like fucking with her. Whereas in '08, I think they fuck with her as soon as like the guy goes and gets cigarettes, which I believe at least timestamp wise happens faster than the guy going to get food.
Definitely.
At least it comes off that way.
Definitely.
So I would have to like fact check that, so don't quote me on it, but at least it feels faster. And of course that, like what Marva said, means the action pick or the thrill or the suspense picks up a lot quicker. There's also not like a little weird, like, I guess, debate over if she really saw something either. Like, it's just once he gets there, I think they kind of have like a little back and forth, but it isn't like something that where they have a whole conversation and then it cuts to them eating food and then the chase happens. Like, I think they're already like, the strangers already kind of start fucking with them as soon as the boyfriend gets back.
They become very aggressive very quickly versus like a slow build up to it.
Which was weird for them to build up to her seeing a stranger and then cut back down to like, you took away like all the suspense and now they're eating cheeseburgers in Chapter 1 and then you have to build it back up again. It's like, just
it kind of interrupted the flow, if you will. I mean, when the strangers in '08 decided to attack, like, you knew it was coming. The music changed, the aura changed, the energy changed, not just of the characters, but of the movie as well.
The other cool thing about '08 too, and it sounds like we're really dogging on Chapter 1. Like, we did like a couple things of it. It's just, it really was like a 5 out of 10 film for, I think, both of us, right middle of the road. But the other cool thing about '08 is that the person that they accidentally shoot once they become armed is actually his best friend. It's the one he called and told to get down there as quick as possible to pick him up. That way he doesn't have to stay the night with his girlfriend who turned him down. I think that makes a hell of a lot more sense than the refrigerator being randomly broken at the one Airbnb location. And of course the owner shows up literally just a couple hours later.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, but in the real world,
that's not gonna
what
happen.
motherfucker is gonna show up late at night to fix your shit? You know what I mean? Like, especially when you know that they're leaving in the morning, right? I
would just be like,
if they're there for 5 or 6 days, sure, but if they're there just for the morning, until the morning, like, no one's gonna go fix that, bro. Like, come on, dog.
No.
Like, come on.
They don't need the 5 stars that bad.
But yeah, our point being that they end up shooting the owner of the Airbnb in Chapter 1. I just thought, cool, but, I think that was our first instance of seeing some real blood. And, but even then, they didn't really show the face that much. But in '08, I think it makes a lot more sense for it to be Matt, the friend of this dude, and that's who he ended up shooting. So I think it adds a hell of a lot more, to the story as well, because shit, man, imagine that, killing your best friend and you still got people coming after you.
Yeah, that would mentally shock me, because I mean, with Chapter 1, when the guy shoots the property owner or the Airbnb owner, like, you see him get rocked and you see him get like very shocked, but that's just it. There's nothing more. There's no like actual like relationship between the two characters other than the fact that he's the Airbnb host. As far as like getting the people tied down and like the chases that the characters go through, I feel like with '08 again, it's a little bit more elaborate. It's a little bit more thought out, if you will. It's more conniving. It's very much like mouse and cat type of play. While with Chapter 1, it just seems to be like a play on chances. I mean, the couple at one point even make it out of the house and into the shed. Granted, we come to find out that the strangers allowed for that to happen and have been watching them the entire time, but still they made it outside of the house. While with this one, like, neither one of them stepped foot outside of the house the second that both of them were in there after the cigarettes.
I think one of them made it out to the car, but at that point it was already just too late.
Yeah.
All three of them had showed themselves at that point. But the more that we talk about this, are you noticing that? Because we brought this up in our Instagram review, but I think now that we're discussing it and breaking it down, it's more like apparent than ever. This really was just like a shot for shot retelling, but worse.
Essentially, yeah. Because I mean, even the trucks would like they still drove in with an old truck, like an old Ford truck. It was a different kind of old Ford truck. Granted, the people who
They did the same, like they blocked them off in the car. So
yeah,
very.
they had a pillar go through it. One of the big differences between Chapter 1 and '08 is the way that the main characters die, which is the strangers end up revealing their faces to the main characters before they kill them. And they're all rather like very intimate kills where the guy takes 2 stabs of the boyfriend and then the girl takes a
One
shot.
stab.
One stab. One stab. I thought it was 2.
They each got 1 stab.
They each got 1 stab to the guy and then the girl.
No. One person stabbed the guy and then one person stabbed the girl, and that was it. That was it. There was nothing else.
Oh, I thought it was like 2 people for the guy and then
No.
1 person for the girl. Never mind.
Makes it worse, right?
Yeah. But still, it's very personable because like they show their faces and then both the characters seem to kind of like I don't want to say know who they are, but like panic sets in and they start
For 08?
Yeah, for 08 and like
Yeah, I don't think they know who they are, but it's very much like a I can't really put it into words, but I just feel like that in and of itself is just I think that would terrify me more.
Yeah.
Like them taking the mask off, and it's just because at that point, like it's very human to human, and
it seems very personal.
Yeah. So.
And the only justification that like this couple gets is that they were home at that time.
Yeah.
While in Chapter 1, like they just say, "Oh well, you were here."
Yeah.
Saying like implying that if they weren't there, then none of this would have happened.
The kill's a lot more graphic too.
Even though
there's more blood, but not as much as I remembered. But the one thing that they did do that I appreciated, and this is a very old horror trick.
Mm-hmm.
You see it all the time. Like even in some comedy movies, they'll do it where like they cut away from the scene and then they'll just show something else, but you hear the screams.
Yeah,
that very old school horror trick, and I think that added a lot to it.
It did.
I don't know if you can really get away with that in 2024, but back then, like, that was pretty dope. And the reason why I say you can't really get away with it in 2024 is because nowadays we have movies like Terrifier, which literally show you the dismemberment of a body.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very hard for like people to go out there and judge. Like even movies like Scream, they've gotten a lot more showing you how people get stabbed and how many times, and it's very intimate. You know, that the whole like cut away from stuff is very like back in the day, but I think it works for that movie. You know, like and you're hearing them get stabbed too, like the gushing, the blood, the knife hitting their skin,
the squelches,
and you just hear them like screaming, but it's like showing like far away shots of the house and the area, and I think that's pretty cool. You know? So
definitely. Just like MJ said, it seemed more like elaborate and more intricate with this round with 08 at the very least, while with Chapter 1 it just seemed very like minimal. I don't know, like I felt like I was kind of stepping out of like an early 2000s era after watching Chapter 1, where like the whole blood strike was happening throughout Hollywood.
But overall I think the movie itself was what do you say, like I would probably maybe
6 out of 10 in the reel, and I'll stick to it because I still haven't seen it again. But after watching 08, like I truly do understand just how not good Chapter 1 was.
I was gonna say I think I still stick with 5 out of 10 for Chapter 1, but I think 08 probably give that like a 7 out, maybe an 8 out of 10.
I was gonna say 8, yeah.
8 out of 10 probably sounds pretty good, but yeah. Anyways, let us know, what did you think of Chapter 1? Did it live up to your expectations, if you had any for this film? Also, let us know down below what you think about The Strangers 08 and how that lives up, because that very much is a cult classic, and if you haven't seen it in a while, I highly recommend you going to watch it. But this has been Slashers of Sync. Thank you guys for tuning in as always. We'll talk to you guys next time.